So, as you can see from my title, I'm not going to talk either about Cambridge or the experience of refugees, but talking to friends, I hear again and again that people have very little idea of the immense impact of the emigres from Nazi Europe on British art history. Whoops.
It's fine. Left click.
Left click to go
Exactly.
from slide to slide.
Or that button.
Right, thank you very much. Yes, so only in Edinburgh could you take courses but not a degree in history of art before 1932. There were professorships in a number of universities, people who gave occasional lectures on art history. The Courtauld was the first place where you could study for a degree, and this was founded only in 1932. By contrast, in Germany, the first professorship at Göttingen in 1813, and by 1930, professorships in 36 universities. So a huge number of art historians emigrated, 252, most with PhDs, not a single person with a PhD, of course, in this country at the time. 93 remained in UK for at least a year, and 59 settled permanently. Very, very difficult because of the university situation for them to find jobs. And the women, for reasons that we've heard today, fared particularly badly, but that's not my theme. So why was there this disparity between the UK and Germany? The answer was that art history was not considered a scholarly subject in this country. Connoisseurs wrote art appreciations, sharing intuitive responses, and other than that, there were simply archival and antiquarian studies. By contrast, in Germany, thanks to Goethe, university education was conceived as Bildung, namely cultural education, and German art history was characterized by the development of vocabulary of visual analysis, which could assist in dating and placing works historically and geographically, the production of catalogue raisonnés, the creation of atlases showing the distribution of various types of object, the collection and study of period writings on art and architecture, the relation of objects of study to their cultural and historical context, the study of symbolism, the meaning of works of art for their original recipients, debates on art historical methodology, and something also very alien to this country, the conviction that visual images could and should be used as historical documents, and that the insights they give are in no way inferior to those derived from the study of written sources. Transformational, sorry, where's it come? There we are. No, well, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. What happens, how do I get back on this?
No, you can't, unfortunately you can't.
Oh dear. Can I get back on this?
Where are you?
Yeah, you're going forward.
Here we are.
Here we are, thank you very much. So, transformational was the arrival of the Warburg Institute from Hamburg in 1933 with 6 members of staff and 60,000 books and financial support from Samuel Courtauld. So why was it quite so important? The library was unrivaled. 30% of its books were not to be found even in the British Museum Library. That's what's today, of course, the British Library. It was an interdisciplinary research institute of a kind that was unique in its day, and its focus was on the ideas and thought processes that might explain Renaissance and medieval culture. Its scholars were trained in the history of art, in history, philosophy, classical languages, psychology, and archaeology. Interdisciplinary research now is all the fashion, but it certainly wasn't then. Moreover, they studied the cross-fertilization of different cultures, European, Islamic, Asian, and the impact on British scholars was immense. John Pope Hennessy was a junior curator at the V&A at the time it arrived, later director of the V&A and the British Museum. He remarks, the arrival of the Institute was a turning point in the development of art history in England, thanks to the personality of its director, Zuxel. He was an imaginative scholar of extraordinary range. My own debt to him was boundless. So the émigrés provided art historians and the public with books. The founders of the Phaidon Press, Goldscheider, himself trained as an art historian, brought the Phaidon Press to this country thanks to Sir Stanley Unwin, who bought all Bella Horowitz's stock just before the Anschluss, facilitating its transfer to London. He noted that the appetite for art books had never been tested in this country. It was, he said, nothing less than a scheme to give the British public, for around 10 and 6 per volume, art publications containing reproductions, both in number and in quality, in excess of what a publisher would normally provide for £2, 2 shillings. David Talbot Rice, the Byzantinist, then the professor in Edinburgh, wrote, "But now the specialist will be able to own complete monographs without any financial difficulties. It opens a whole new sphere in the field of art appreciation and its dissemination. The only way to learn about a particular painter is to look and compare. This has hitherto been something extremely difficult to do, even for the specialists. It's been practically impossible for the amateur. With this series available, all the difficulties are banished." Then, in 1949, Walter Neurath, together with his wife Eva, founded Thames and Hudson Press. It was pointed out to me yesterday that they took the names from the 2 great rivers, London and New York. So, so where are we? I'm going the other way. Right, here we are. The Courtauld, as I said, was the first place in the UK where you could study for a degree in art history, and it combined the legacy of the Warburg to a degree, and particularly Viennese art history. Anthony Blunt began lecturing already in 32, and he was director from 47 to 74. And I'd like to quote from the preface to his art theory in Italy, 1450 to 1600, which was written originally with a scholarship from this college and was his research fellowship dissertation. He writes, to the Warburg, I also owe practical assistance. He must have got all his texts from there, but it is overshadowed by a debt of a more spiritual kind. In the process of working with members of this institute, I have had the inestimable advantage of seeing a really scientific method consistently applied, and any features of this book which are not wholly amateur are due to this example. His wonderful work on Poussin and his intellectual formation is wholly Warburgian, unthinkable without the influence of the Warburg. So 3 teachers were particularly influential at the Courtauld: Blunt, Johannes Wilder, and George Janetsky. Janetsky was still there, and Blunt, when I was a student. Everybody loved Janetsky. I heard from my teachers how they adored Johannes Wilder. Both of them were trained in the Viennese school of very, very precise visual analysis, and they use visual analysis together with written documents to try and chart in great detail what happened, when, and how. Wilder also played a role in producing catalogues of drawings of Michelangelo in the British Museum, which is still consulted as a major document and showing how to write such a catalogue. So the pupils of these people not only taught at the Courtauld, they in turn taught all around this country. And I wanted to look just at what I could find quickly last week about art history in different universities. And of the people who founded art history courses in this country between the later 40s and 69, 6 of them were Courtauld trained, 1 Warburg trained, and 2 were immigrants, Ettlinger and Hans Hess. So Francis Haskell was inspired by Nicholas Pevsner, and I think the lecturers at Cambridge, Oxford and Leeds were hugely important. Pevsner lecturing weekly for many, many years. Vint is supposed to have drawn audiences of 1,000 in Oxford, both of them lecturers on the BBC. Hauser was an art historian of rather different kind. He wrote The Social History of Art. He was a Marxist. His book now seems rather naive, but I'm sure he stimulated the much more sophisticated Marxist writers of the 1970s, notably T.J. Clark. So finally, I want to say how enormously varied the books of the immigrants were. Both Gombrich and Pevsner wrote popular books. The Story of Art became a bestseller, published in innumerable languages. But the range of Gombrich was absolutely extraordinary. He disentangled the meaning of puzzling images. He was interested in the psychology of perception. He pondered how and why tastes change, how we assign value to works of art. He looked at caricatures and at the decorative art, and also at posters, as well as the fine art. The work he was most proud of was demonstrating that the evolution of realistic representation developed through the imitation, the invention, and then the imitation of schemata. Finally, I think he was very influential because he was a great friend of Karl Popper, and we've heard a little bit about logical positivism in Vienna, and his empiricist outlook fitted very well with the British empirical tradition. Pevsner was much more of a Hegelian, and I think that his most important work is undoubtedly his tremendous Buildings of England, which I suspect many of you in this room own, and the commissioning of the scholarly tomes on the history of art as the Pelican History of Art. He commissioned one scholar after another to write them. Finally, Rudolf Wittkower, who taught at the Warburg between 34 and 36. No one before Wittkower and Zaxel had related English art to the Mediterranean, and he went on to write on the relationship of English Palladians to Palladio. His study of the proportioning and the geometrical ordering of Renaissance buildings was very innovative, and the discussion of the meaning of the proportioning, meaning attached to it in the Renaissance. I remember reading his analysis of Michelangelo's designs for the Laurentian Library and for St. Peter's Dome. Extraordinary pieces of writing showing you how Michelangelo's thoughts evolved and all that happened between him and his patrons. And my final slide, the debt the other way, I'm quoting Panofsky. Every German art historian endeavouring to make himself understood in English had to make up his own dictionary. In doing so, he realised that his native terminology was often either unnecessarily recondite or downright imprecise. The German language, unfortunately, permits a fairly trivial thought to claim from behind a woolen curtain of apparent profundity, and conversely, a multitude of meanings to lurk behind one term. In short, when speaking or writing in English, even an art historian must more or less know what he means and mean what he says, and this compulsion was extremely wholesome for us all. Thank you.